This is the There Is Another Way podcast from spencerbruce.com. Making life work as a creative. Hi there, boys and girls. How are you all doing out there in podcast land? I hope you are all doing exceptionally well. I hope you and your families are all safe and well, given the current situation of COVID and what is happening in the world right now. I guess there are so many words that we can use to describe the current situation. And most of those, I feel, given that we are at week 6 in the UK, have been used. And as such, I don't feel I really want to, dwell on the negativity. This is a horrible, horrible time. There is no doubt about that. And there are a lot of people suffering, and we shouldn't make light of that in any way at all. But at the same time, I really feel that I want to focus on the positives. We are where we are. There is no denying that it is a bad, bad situation in so many ways and affecting, pretty much everyone. That's it. It's affecting the whole planet. But at the same time, dwelling on all the negativity is not going to get us through this. I do really feel that out of all the darkness, there are quite a lot of positives that we can take away from this situation and look to developing a better future. I know that sounds like a grand utopian vision, but I really strongly believe that, we can make a better future out of the darkness that we have just endured. One of the things on reflection that I kind of have to smile at in regards to this whole situation is the fact that for years, if not decades, I have been harping on about the fact that I find it totally insane that millions and millions of people have to congregate in a small couple of square mile area in big city centers at 9 o'clock in the morning and go to work with all the stress, all the toil, all the cost to carbon resources that takes. I just thought it's always been ludicrous. And hey, almost overnight, it seems that we can do this. We can function, or a lot of us can function in a way which is more suitable to having a better work-life balance. Now, I'm not arguing that you should never go to an office, because being in an office, hanging out with people, communicating with people is a great reason for doing that. But at the same time, there is no real necessity that we all have to do it at the same time every day, Monday to Friday, and all have to be in the same space. And as we've seen, hopefully, through the technology we have, that this is possible. We can work this way. Things still can get done. And of course, as always, there's people arguing out there, well, the people have to go and do jobs. Yeah, I'm not saying that. I'm not talking about that. I'm literally talking about the majority of people in offices. We could have so many different solutions. And hopefully one of the benefits that will come out of this is there'll be a wake-up call to realize that you don't need all these posh, fancy, expensive offices crammed into a couple of square miles in a city center that millions of people have to be in at 9 o'clock every morning. There are so many different variable ways of working, still keeping that method on, still allowing people to go in and socialize at work and have meetings with people once the lockdown has been lifted. But there is no need for this to be daily occurrence, and people can be left at home, trusted to work and get on with things. So in some ways, I see myself as a pioneer. I've been harping on about this, been always seen as the mad guy in the room going, oh, it's not possible, it's impossible, blah, blah, blah. Well, it is possible, and this has actually proved it. I rest my case. There's a little bit of a rant there. We are where we are, and as I said, I think that if we start to now, as we are beginning to come out into the light again, start to look for the positives from this, we'll start to find that there are a lot of positives around this virus situation, and maybe the world will be a better place because of it. Although, I guess some of you are thinking out there, and I think sometimes the reality is, give it a couple of months and we'll all be back to normal. But we can hope. We hopefully we can learn some lessons and make the world better. What is the topic of this week's podcast? Well, it's a little bit of a controversial one. It is entitled "Worst Advice Ever." Yes, that is it. I'm going to put my hands up and argue a case about what I think is possibly some of the worst advice ever. Now, let me give you a little bit of background to this. I actually thought at some point in my life that this was the best advice ever. I really did. In fact, if you go back to episode 38 of the podcast, the one entitled All About Deadlines, I go into what a brilliant concept and thought experiment that this is, and that we should all be doing it. But yes, I am a hypocrite. I have changed my mind somewhat. Or have I? That's the question. Well, perhaps not totally changed my mind, but I've certainly had a long, hard think about this piece of advice and realized that maybe it is not a good thing. So what am I actually talking about? What advice? Well, back in episode 38, I talked about having seen a video by Tim Urban called Inside the Mind of a Master Procrastinator. It was a TED talk that he did. I was kind of blown away by this talk. I shared it with loads of friends, and I was heartened to see loads of my friends and colleagues had already seen this video. And it's a really popular video, as currently it has nearly 28 million views on YouTube. That is an incredible amount of views. And it is the idea that we live our lives when we're procrastinating. We need a deadline to get things done. Otherwise, we let things drag and drag and drag. Now, I am not arguing against that at all. But there was one thing in the video that really struck a chord with me. And having discussed this with variety of friends and colleagues, it certainly struck a chord with them as well. And it is the idea that you should work out your average life expectancy. Let's say, God willing, we all live to maybe 90 years old as an average, hopefully a lot longer, obviously. But let's just say 90. And what you do is you then draw on a piece of paper a box for every week that you have left until you are 90 years old. And then the reveal of what is in the talk is that, oh my God, shock, horror. There are not a lot of boxes left. We are running out of boxes. That is your deadline. Literally, you have to get all these things done before that deadline, and that puts the pressure on you. It should inspire you to get on with all these projects and get things done because you really do have a deadline. It kind of makes sense, and it's kind of like, oh wow, I've only got 256 boxes left. I better get on with things, and that's a real deadline, so I need to do all these things. And in some regards, that is a great piece of advice, and there's no denying that we do need deadlines, or at least I do, to get things finished. Otherwise, things do drag on forever. Now, I've been thinking a lot about this idea of like, oh, well, there is the ultimate deadline when you die and you need to get on and do things and cram in as much as possible and do all these things that you need to get done before the official deadline hits you and you die. Then I took a step back and I was thinking, you know what? As someone who suffers a little bit from stress, I really realized that this video and this concept actually makes me quite anxious. And it is actually taking away from a lot of enjoyment because I've got so many things I want to do in my life, and there's so many places I want to go, and there's so many places, people I want to see. I'm looking here in my studio and looking at the chart on the wall, all the projects that I want to do, all these ideas and concepts, and there's hundreds of them. And if I take into consideration this idea that I only have a finite amount of time to do them, and I know that I only have a finite amount to do them, I'm taking away from the enjoyment of life. Surely, life should not be a project. Life should not have a deadline, because if it does, then you can never really enjoy it because you're just stressing about meeting the deadline or your official deadline. And that, the more I think of it, means that if you are that way inclined, and I know I am, you start stressing about it, it's going to probably mean that your deadline will end up being sooner because you're going to deadline yourself. You're going to procrastinate yourself into an early grave by just the stress of trying to get everything done in life by this picture of all the boxes that you have left. And the more I think about it and the more I consider it, it's like, no, my life isn't a project which needs to be finished. There are projects in my life that need to be finished. There is work in my life that needs to be finished. And setting deadlines for those, or having deadlines set for them, is totally and completely fine. There is no issue at all there. But having my life as a project and as a fixed or a variable deadline is so stress inducing. So the more I think about it, the more I realize that this piece of advice of drawing out all the boxes that you have to figure out when your deadline is and go, oh, shock horror, I'm going to die soon, or I'm going to die at some point, is really, really the worst advice. It is not the best advice to motivate you to procrastinate, because it scares you and it forces you into anxiety and it forces you into stress, because everything in your life then is up against this deadline. So you're trying to cram everything in. And what that means is you haven't got the time or the inclination to sit back and enjoy. You feel guilty when you're hanging out with your friends because I've got projects to finish before my death. I haven't got time to sit and watch a beautiful sunset because I've got projects to finish before my death. My life is this project. I've got to travel to every country in the world before my death, and I've got to cram everything into these boxes. So the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this is actually really not healthy advice. There is a lot of stuff in the video that is good advice about procrastination and getting wrong with it. But sometimes actually, again, sounding slightly hypocritical about it, maybe procrastination is part of can be a useful part of the process in allowing you time to think things through and daydream and be creative, and actually always being on, always thinking of deadlines, always forcing yourself and getting these things done does have a negative byproduct. It, as I've said a few times now, it causes stress, it can cause anxiety, and most importantly, it's taking away the enjoyment of the projects. Because who says that, maybe an artistic project or a creative project won't get better, won't improve if you give it time to sit with it, if you take time to sit with it and let it be there. Again, as you can see, there's this kind of frictional schism of an argument here where on one hand, I'm advocating that you do need to maybe put deadlines in to get things finished, and also things need to be finished and things need to get out there. But at the same time, I just don't think that your life on a whole should be set to a deadline. So there is my argument for why I think that TED Talk, in reflection from all those episodes ago, is possibly the worst advice ever. I say that in jest. It's a little bit clickbaity of a title. I do realize that. I'd love to hear your thoughts and what you think is the worst piece of advice ever. I'm sure I can probably think of other worse pieces of advice, but the more I reflect back on this, and the more I've been thinking about doing this for this podcast, the more I've realized that, this video, this concept, this idea does create a lot of stress in my life, because there is this deadline in however many years, 45 years maybe, and I've got a lot to do. I guess where it kind of comes from is, taking the Buddhist idea that we're all going to die at some point, and the sooner you embrace that, the sooner you will start living. But it's very much the opposite of this idea of a deadline. It's like, appreciate that you are going to pass, that you will not be here at some point. So sit back and forget about all the stresses and the worries and the non-important things in life. So it's almost like the same message, but with a different outcome. And I know that I think I prefer the Buddhist outcome rather than the outcome in the TED Talk. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Please do head over to the Facebook group. There is Another Way podcast on Facebook. Hit us up, join the conversation, do join in. I'd really appreciate it if you could give us a thumbs up on whatever podcast app you are listening to this, or give us a review on iTunes. It really helps a lot. Also, please do, if you're not a member on the Facebook group, do head over and give us a like. It would mean a lot to me. I'm going to wrap it up there. I guess there is a lot to consider, and for me in particular, I am now no longer thinking of my life having a deadline. I do have deadlines. I have things that I need to do in the next couple of weeks and the next couple of days, but I'm not putting my whole life on a deadline mission. I want to sit back, enjoy the sounds, enjoy the smells, enjoy the sights of the world, and let the world wash over me sometimes, and then put myself back in the firing line to get things done, but not think of my whole life as a mission, as a project that needs to be completed by a certain date. Stay safe out there. Best wishes to you and all your families. I've been Bruce C, and I will catch you later.